Carson Beck, Mario Cristobal, and the Miami Hurricanes take on Fernando Mendoza, Curt Cignetti, and the Indiana Hoosiers in the College Football Playoff National Championship from Miami Gardens at Hard Rock Stadium. That's right, Miami is hosting the national title game. You cannot make up a better storyline for a team that has been trying to get back to what they were at the beginning of the 2000s. This is going to be a heck of a football game. The Heisman Trophy winner, Mendoza, he has played his best football undoubtedly in the CFP. His flawless performance against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and he backs it up with an even better game against the Oregon Ducks. Only 3 incompletions against Oregon. That was a top 10 defense, and he went right through them, as did the run game. The question of the entire game will be, can Indiana hold up against the Miami front four? Now, for the Hurricanes, Akheem Mesidor, his status going into the game next Monday is in doubt, right? He had a really interesting guy sort of fell on him with the elbow and came back into the game, had it braced up. Will he be at 100%? I don't know if anyone on the field will be at 100%, but certainly that's something to watch for, is how effective is he with his arm and with that right elbow and him being able to generate force. Such a violent player, as are a lot of guys on that D line, like Ahmad Moten. Ahmad Moten with that ankle got hurt the second play of the game against Ole Miss, and his impact wasn't felt the way that it was in previous matchups. Miami was not the defensive line that had more success. It was Ole Miss that had 4 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, whereas Miami, they were not the team that was getting pressure as much on the quarterback. Now, I think that there's a little bit of a blueprint there. If you look at the way Ole Miss got the football out of Trinidad Chambliss' hands quickly, getting it on the perimeter to his wide receivers, Mendoza and company, I would think that they're going to look at that and say, all right, we've got a quarterback with a quick release, really strong arm. Doesn't matter which hash mark we're on. If we're going to the far side towards the field, and we can get the ball out of our hands quickly and still throw those back shoulders that have essentially been patented by this Indiana this Indiana offense. So for those defensive backs and the secondary for Miami, I think that that's something that's shown up the last 2 seasons with Curtis Rourke a year ago, and him even playing through that. He had the knee that was torn up and being really effective throwing to Sarratt. And then this season, the emergence of Charlie Becker is sort of shocking to see that type of impactful player come on the scene on the bigger stages. He really showed up against Penn State when they were down. Elijah Sarratt didn't have him available, and he stepped up and he put up huge numbers. And then in the Big Ten champ game, monster game. And then it continued in the Rose Bowl. And then in the semifinal, this Indiana offense is firing on all cylinders. And if they want to keep their Heisman quarterback upright, get the ball out of their hands quickly. Rely on that run game. For the Miami offense against Indiana, I don't know why you change a single thing. When you're playing against this high-flying Indiana offense with a quarterback that's thrown for more than 40 touchdowns, and they've got that triple-headed monster of wide receivers and that dynamic duo of running backs in Hemby and Kaelon Black. If I'm Miami, I just do what I did against the Buckeyes and against Ole Miss. Control the ball, time of possession, be extremely efficient, and try to keep your offense on the field. That might just be the best defense against Indiana. They probably are able to stack up line of scrimmage wise. It's a team that certainly has proven that they can compete with anybody, not just anybody, but dominate some of the biggest brands in college football. No brand's been bigger than the Alabama Crimson Tide. They ran them off the track in Pasadena in the Rose Bowl. And then against Oregon, a team that's been so good, all of those 5-star players that they've recruited, and they threw them out of the club in the first 25 minutes of the game and essentially won the game on that deep ball touchdown to Charlie Becker that put them up 28-7. So if I'm the Canes, look, Mark Fletcher, the way he's been running the ball, another 133 yards on the ground, and Shamar Brown, who's been really effective. And these two backs added to the legs of Carson Beck, you've got some sort of formula that I have a lot of confidence in against Indiana. Look, these are two of the better defenses in college football. Without a doubt, Indiana, if they weren't the best defense in the country, they were 2 or 3 right up there. And I would argue that both of these two teams have seen the third other best defense. It would be Ohio State with those Buckeyes and that historical statistic defense, at least. Miami and Indiana. These are the best 3 defenses in the country because they don't make mistakes. They don't give up explosive plays. They stop the run. They get after the quarterback. They are sound. They're excellent at preventing mobile quarterbacks from scrambling. The way that Miami held Trinidad Chambliss in check was unbelievable. And then the performances throughout the season, like the game against Iowa comes to mind, 2 wins against Oregon, very impressive from Indiana. Carson Beck's athletic profile is definitely a lot similar to, I would say, a Dante more than a Gronowski, but still he's more athletic than people give him credit for. Certainly good enough to go pick up a couple of first downs. He once again against the Rebels had a couple of really important first down picks up with his legs, using his legs to get outside the pocket, pick up yards when he saw it came available. And that's where you're looking at two of the best quarterbacks throughout the playoff. These guys haven't been making mistakes, not turning the football over all that often. For Mendoza, it hasn't happened. And if you don't put it in harm's way, when you play great defense, you're going to have a great chance to beat anybody. That's why I'm so excited for this matchup, is because I got a lot of faith that this isn't going to be a game that's over at halftime, that we can have a tight sort of down to the wire, at least a game in the fourth quarter with the team being a stop from getting right back into it, or it comes down to a late kick. And these are the two teams historically that match up a little bit differently. You think of Miami and this is the success going into this millennium and in the early part of the 2000s in Indiana, who hasn't had that. And now where they both are, I don't see a reason why Indiana's not a playoff team next year, with Hoover coming in and then Miami with some of the guys on this roster that'll be coming back. So certainly in a great place right now and currently. So if you're a fan of one of these two teams, I know it's going to be nerve-wracking. And once this game kicks off, you're going to be living just in pure sweat. But it really is a celebration of these two teams that have done an unbelievable job built around two different identities. Indiana is that camaraderie, that team that's come together with one goal, and that's to essentially play for each other. Whereas Miami, they've got that one common goal of going 1-0 and violently destroying their opponents and decimating them. And Indiana has done that. It's not like they haven't been decimating opponents. They have different styles. Indiana, and the way that they've played the last couple of weeks, gives you a real belief that they'll be able to have success with these wide receivers and that they'll be able to run the football a little bit, and you get a bit more confidence that they can with the way Ole Miss ran the ball against Miami. 6 yards a carry, 120 yards on the ground. Ole Miss was running the football pretty well. Again, 80 yards were from one play. So you take that play away, you've got 40 yards on 20 carries. So I will add that the explosive play completely adds into that. But again, here to argue against that point, this Indiana team, they found so many holes throughout the day against Oregon, which leads me to believe that they can certainly find an explosive run at some point in the run game, that they can break one open. So Miami, except for one run, they held the Rebels to 40 yards on 20 carries, 2 yards a carry, except for the explosive run. But that explosive run makes you really a little bit cautious on the side of Miami and how they're going to attack and be aggressive. If you're sending a run blitz, or if you're really getting guys at the line of scrimmage, I'm favoring towards an Indiana possibility they can break a run. Now, that's not to say this Indiana defense isn't unbelievable. Behind Mesidor and Blay and Rueben Bain, there is a secondary that fires down, and they're not at all afraid to hit. The status of Xavier Lucas is something to certainly monitor, as well as Poiser, Wesley Basaint. They've had some guys banged up a little bit. I'm going to be honest. I think just about all those guys are going to be able to play. This is the national championship. If there's ever a game where you're going to show up and play through an injury and just get some smelling salts rolling, it's the national championship. And having this game at home in their building, I would imagine that Keionte Scott is going to be an impact type player, and Fernando Mendoza is going to have to identify him at the snap. Miami, they dropped 3 or 4 interceptions. That is something that you can't do against Indiana. The bounces just went their way. And for Miami, they let Ole Miss off the hook a couple of times, and they badly outplayed them in the first half, and yet it's only a 17-13 game. That can't happen against the Hoosiers. They're too good. They're too experienced at every single position on the team, specifically offensive line, that if they have Fernando Mendoza in a situation where he's got the football down by less than 7 points with more than, let's call it, 90 seconds, you'd be really confident that he can drive the length of the field and get a game-winning score with what he's proven throughout the year. How many tackles for loss, sacks does this front seven for the Hurricanes come up with? Because I already know for the Hoosiers, it's going to be probably 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. It's going to be a decent enough day. I don't believe that they're going to come out and have the type of performance like they have a couple of times this year, where it's just absurd. They put up 6, 7 sacks and have 8 or 9 tackles for loss. This Miami offensive line is still anchored by really good players. And on the right side, Mauigoa, he's somebody that you are going to try and run behind a little bit. On that Indiana front, to shift gears, I thought that losing Daly would have been a larger factor. He had led the team, and I want to say the Big Ten in tackles for loss this season. And then who steps up? It's those linebackers behind it. Aidan Fisher and Isaiah Jones, they combined for 3 tackles for loss against Oregon. And you have guys that make plays in the secondary. Angelo Pons, the interception, taking it to the crib, the first play of the game, I felt like a dumb you-know-what. And I picked Oregon to win that game. I thought that the Oregon Ducks had what it took from a front seven standpoint to turn this into trench warfare, grind the game out. In the first play of the game, they come out airing the football. The throw is a little bit inside. Pons makes a heck of a play, and he puts them up 7-0. I already feel like a stupid individual making that prediction that they'd come out with the win. In Indiana, they've got the football and taken it all the way back in just 5 seconds. So that was a horrible pick. I got to own that one. I was told about it in the comments with that prediction, and I'm going to own it, that Indiana should have been the selection that game. They beat Oregon, and they won the line of scrimmage in that battle, and I was flat out wrong. For Miami to win this game against Indiana, it's a factor of about 3 things. The line of scrimmage, no doubt, is something that you're going to have to win. Hard, very difficult for me to imagine that they flat out win that line of scrimmage the way that the Hoosiers have played throughout the season, with Mikail Kamara turning it on in the CFP and Tyreek Tucker, arguably the most underrated interior defensive lineman in college football. Behind that, Isaiah Jones and Aidan Fisher. This front seven for Indiana feels like a unit that they could hold Miami to around 100 yards rushing. It's just a matter of how many attempts does Miami have. Are they able to get to third down and manageable, 3rd down and 2, 3rd and 3, so that they can keep attacking the run and have 2 plays to run when they get to 3rd down and manageable. It's a question of, are you able to have 4.5 yards a carry? Or is it something like 2.8 or 3? Because if it's 2.8 or 3, you're going to be looking at 3rd and 5 and 6 where you can't run the ball. But if you're running it for 4 yards a carry plus, 4.5 a carry, then you can get into 3rd down and manageable parts. And then the impact of Fisher and Jones is these guys fly around, and they faced all that talent. Malik Benson, Decorian Moore, Johnson, and Sadiq. Miami with Daniels and Keelan Marion and Malachi Toney. This is another really dynamic group of wide receivers 3 weeks in a row where Indiana has seen unbelievable talent at that position. So I really do believe that helps them a lot. On the same side of that coin, look at what Miami has had to face the last couple of weeks. Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate Claire for the Buckeyes. And then this past week with Stribling and Daquan Wright and Deuce Alexander and having to defend against Kewan Lacey, you just imagine that going into the season, you talk about some of the more talented groups and weapons. Both of these teams have earned every ounce of the opportunity to play in the national championship game, going through those gauntlets and winning those games in the manners in which they won them. Unbelievably impressive stuff and excellent quarterback play throughout it. I mean, Ty Simpson at one point in the year was considered a Heisman contender the same way Dante Moore was. Both those guys could be top 5 picks one day. And then for the Miami side, they had to knock off Julian Sayin, a Heisman contender. Marcel Reed was firmly in the Heisman race at one point. And then Trinidad Chambliss being denied that 6-year waiver. He's going to be a draft pick, likely something like round 3, round 4. Would imagine that somebody's going to take a flyer and select him and be impressed by his physical traits and then the experience of the CFP. So all those matchups, it just goes to show you that some of these narratives start to get expunged when you're at this part of the year and you're in a national championship. When you have that big game experience, or both of these teams have played 3 games in a row against unbelievable opponents, and they have proven their mettle that they can stack up. And you could say, Miami and their schedule the way it was, or Indiana throughout the season and what it looked like. At the end of the day, you're tested, you're proven, you're blooded, you've got warriors at every position now. It's one of those games that really excites you because of the trench battle and what's played between the hashes. And then you throw that out the window. We've got as good as skill position players in this one. On the Indiana side with Sarratt and Cooper and Becker. And then Miami with the wide receivers that we just brought up. And then the secondary, D'Angelo Pons, Lewis Moore. Have to see with Amari Farrell how healthy he is, but he was back in the lineup after he got hurt, I believe, on the opening kickoff of this game. You can go through both of these rosters. You're looking at something around 20 to 25 NFL players. There might not be any 5-stars with Indiana. You're going to have something better than a 5-star. You're going to have NFL talent guys that are playing on Sundays in the National Football League after they play on this on this Monday matchup. The Miami offensive line versus the Indiana D line is one of those that I equate to in a way, the Ohio State versus Miami matchup. So going into that game, you had seen a Miami team that had just protected decently well enough against A&M. And then this Indiana defensive line and what they did to Alabama got after it. I got a lot of questions on both those sides, and I wish I had the answers to know how it plays out. We can only make assumptions here and predictions, which is the basis of this video. But if there's some player in this one, I'm circling Tyreek Tucker, because that interior pressure is so unlike what you have on the edges. Now, I got no questions on the other side of that, whether Rueben Bain or Akheem Mesidor can be truly big impact players. But when you have a guy like Tyreek Tucker and his size right there in the middle. This is the same for Moten or David Blay. They're unbelievable. The Tyreek Tucker is my full impact player on the side of Indiana against that Miami offensive line. That front five is he can impact the run. And what he does to free up Aidan Fisher and Isaiah Jones for them to shoot those gaps and come downhill and play aggressively, it's really understated. Those types of players don't show up a ton in the stat categories. And on this season, Tyreek Tucker didn't put up absurd numbers, 5.5 sacks, 31 total tackles. He's not going to get the attention that's someone that's a double-digit sack guy or that's got 15 tackles for a loss. But when you watch games back and you look at the impact that he was making, he's able to make Mario Landino's job a heck of a lot easier. And Mario Landino, a player that can be back in a season, gives you a lot of faith in that Indiana front and that defense that can be great next year also. Tyreek Tucker's a guy I got to circle. On the Miami side, I wouldn't imagine you circle anyone else except for number 10 offensively. Malachi Toney and his game-changing screenplay to the house touchdown. He ran that one back. Now, Miami didn't get the stop that they needed on the ensuing possession, but that play from Toney was a special type of play that there's less than 5 guys in college football are capable of making. I would imagine that I'd be curious. Omar Cooper might be one of those shifty type guys. The Alabama, Ryan Williams didn't have a great season, but he's got sort of that type of ability. And there's not many besides that. Maybe Mekhi Lemon for USC, but he's got that ability, right? He's not one of those big, huge stature guys. He plays a lot bigger than his size in the stance of if he's making a contested catch. He almost came down with that one-handed grab on the sideline. That was ridiculous. That would have been the catch of the season in this sport, maybe even outdoing Omar Cooper's unreal catch against Penn State in the final minute, the closest anyone was to beating this team. And then you watch this guy block and what his impact will be getting after Moore or D'Angelo Pons and having to come up and block those guys and check their mindset and their mentality. That's something that Indiana's got to be prepared for. Malachi Toney is a full different skill set than any wide receiver they have gone up against this season. He's unbelievable. He's only a true freshman, so he's got a lot more time to prove what he'll be going out in that 2028 NFL draft. But number 10, a player you need to know where he is at all times. Cannot let him beat you. Make it be number 4 or number 6 or number 11, but do not let it be number 10. We flip it around to the defensive side and you look at that Miami defense against Indiana. I have to circle number 4. When he's on, he has been the best player in college football, right up there with Mendoza in the way that he affects games. And is Indiana gonna change their entire game plan around a guy like that? Is possible. Cignetti has to be aware of his athletic profile and the run game. But again, it's the question. Do you change your game plan based on that individual and their traits and their knack of making those big plays? Or do you rely and are you confident enough in your players to block him? And you've got all those great offensive linemen. You've got confidence that your quarterback is mobile enough that he can get away if he needs to. Rueben Bain Jr., if Miami is to win this game against Indiana, you'll go back in the stat line. You'll say, all right, yeah, he had a forced fumble. He had a sack and a half, 2 tackles for loss. And he made his mark on this game the same way he did against A&M and the same way that he did against Ohio State. Miami offense is the key contributor of why they wound up beating Ole Miss. And that's a complete football team. Is you've got a specific game where your offense plays poor. All right, your defense steps up and they can create takeaways like you did against Ohio State and A&M. And then you've got another game where you're not doing that. And now your offense, they pick up the load. For Indiana, if you're going to name number 4, Rueben Bain Jr. for Miami, and who's a player that I'm fully looking at to be their impact player on the offensive side of the football, it's number 13, Elijah Sarratt. No better back shoulder fade wide receiver in the country. I would make an argument he's been the best contested catch wide receiver in college football over the last 2 years. He's put up the type of statistics coming out of JMU and coming from that team where he had 8 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, and having a great year last year. And then the season that he did this season for Indiana, I would be shocked if he's not a second-round pick in the NFL draft. 6'2", 210 pounds, great hands. He can line up in the slot outside. He's going to be a really important player that I think is the most important outside of the quarterback on this offense for the Hoosiers. So I'm going to pick Elijah Sarratt, and it's the same type of deal. You go to the stat box at the end of the day, does Elijah Sarratt have 7 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown? That's something that you'd immediately point to. You'd be like, all right, yeah, that's a great example of why they came out with the win. The only sort of drawback on that for me is Indiana has had so much success in the red zone and been so efficient on third down because of now Charlie Becker and what he does, or these running backs giving them the ball on third and short, or Mendoza to pick up his legs, or for Omar Cooper Jr. to come up with the big play. They've got so many different options with what they can do. It's difficult to pick one guy, although I am going to have to go with number 13. It seems as this offense goes, they go and playing this type of physical, try and destroy you, take your head off defense in Miami. This is a player in Sarratt that stacks up physically as good as anyone in the country to take the type of punishment and pounding that's going to be offered. I've got my questions about Charlie Becker and being a young player, a sophomore, that he's a guy I'm going to have prepared as a top 10 breakout wide receiver in the country next year. You're going to have to write that in right now. That going into next year, whether it be Josh Hoover or Fernando Mendoza's younger brother, like Alberto, he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be a top 10 wide receiver in the country. Long, fast, great hands, physical at the catch point, can separate special teams players, so you can't question his work ethic and his effort. But Charlie Becker, there's going to be a point in this game where there's a third down and he takes a punishing hit. Does he hold on to the football? I've got faith that he does. I think that he's built in that manner. Kids from Tennessee, and I like these Indiana wideouts, what they've proven in those physical games against Penn State, and you could even call a matchup game in Iowa. And then the last couple of weeks, they stacked up and they had a lot of big shots that they took. Let's move it along towards coaching, because Corey Hetherman, the defensive coordinator, and versus Bryant Haines, that's fascinating, these two defensive coordinators and what they're going to try and do to take something away. So let's start with Corey Hetherman and what the primary focus is going to be. Because Miami doesn't have a chance if they don't stop Indiana's running game. If you're not able to limit Indiana to not even like 125, if you can't limit Indiana to less than 150 yards on the ground, and I'm coming up with that wide of a number just because of how effective they've run the football. Like, they even had 118 yards against Ohio State, and the narrative surrounding that game was that Indiana just got manhandled when they were on offense. No, they ran the football for 120 yards. They had a lot of carries, but they still ran the football decently well enough. And on the Miami side against them, they ran it for 153. I think that that's sort of the sweet spot in this one. Which team can get to about 135, 140 rushing yards? Because it's not just the yards that will be added into your stockpile of reasons you'll win or why you can win. It's the time of possession that goes along with that. And it's the wear and tear on the opponents in their defensive line late in the game. If you have a lot of success running the football earlier, those 2-yard gains, they turn into 3 in the third quarter. They turn into 4-yard runs when you're looking to get back into the game or trying to put a team away in the fourth quarter. The same way Miami was sort of chipping away against the Buckeyes, and bam, they break through on that final possession. The same way with Indiana in their pass game, bam, they come up with that third down completion to Becker to seal the game. That's what I love about these two teams, is the way that you argue the third best team in the country this year is Ohio State. Both teams were up by 3 with the football with around 4 or 5 minutes, and they had a chance to go put the game away. Indiana did it in the Big Ten title and earned themselves a first-round bye and the number 1 seed. Miami, football back 5 minutes, they go down the length of the field, and they score a touchdown and put them away. That's against a historical defense. So which of these teams has the capability of doing that? It's very difficult for me to sit here and immediately point to a team with the utmost faith that they do it. If I'm going to lean somewhere, it's Indiana, with the feel of them and the way that they've played, just brutalizing these opponents that have been terrific. Oregon's been one of the best teams and consistent as anyone over the last 3 seasons. And then Alabama essentially ending their national perception of being the team in college football. I think that was truly the team until this season. Alabama, this was like that final year. Is Alabama still Bama? After this year, you're not going to consider Alabama to be the premier standard of the country, and you've got a possibility of it being Miami or Indiana. One of these 2 teams will be at the forefront of all those conversations going forward here, and what that's worth to a school. It's worth like $500 million to win a national title, and just think about possible recruits that you can bring back and bring into your school once you have that sort of brand recognition. Not that Miami needs more of that, but look, that's what Jeremiah Smith said. He would have come to Miami if they had been playing in more of these games. Just imagine if they had number 4 on this roster. And to think that how realistic that was, that they were like 49% of the way there from getting him here. That's the type of guy that leans this game massively in your favor, and for them, it's just too bad that he's not there on their team supporting them and giving them a heck of a chance. So the defensive coordinators are going to play a large role, and then offensively, I love what Dawson's done. I love what Shanahan's done with these offenses and their really physical nature. And they're going to try to establish something from the get-go. And that's run the football, and what play action shots can you take to push the ball downfield. And taking your chances when it's a little bit risky to hold on to the football against that Indiana front 7 with all the sacks they've had this season. And no doubt it is with those edge defenders for Miami. If you're going to hold the football and you're Fernando Mendoza, taking your shots is a risk. And when you have these level of defenses, that's the change, those sudden change areas, if you can hit those bombs down the field. And I think that's another key part of this one, is which team can't hit the explosive plays and easily get the ball 50 yards downfield when it's going to be tough to move the football. So it kind of comes down to the health. Indiana's a healthier team right now going into this matchup, whereas Miami, with some of those injuries in the back end, in the secondary, as well as up there on the front 7, they better have a way to get themselves right mentally, physically, that they can be as effective as possible, because this will be their toughest game of the season. It's this new era of college football, and absolutely here for it, where you bring in a new coach, transfers with them, and you have a team that buys in, and Indiana is right here, and they can spend enough money, and they have a fan base that supports them. 80-20 at the Peach Bowl. I've seen few things that were more impressive than that, specifically as a fan base. And then for the Miami side of it, hosting this game in their building, so you'd imagine it's likely 75-25. A lot of Indiana alumni can no doubt afford to be there. Same goes for, there's a lot of money down there in Miami and a lot of fans that will show up. And I would imagine 70-30, 75-25. It won't be like the 90-10 that you would expect for a typical home game in somebody's arena, but have an identity, and that identity being violence and standing by that, and being a group that is going to still have discipline to them. That's where I was surprised to see the Canes commit all those penalties and late hits, hitting guys like David Blay, just throwing his shoulder in a guy on the ground when it's well after contact. I want to say against Keionte Lacey. Like, what are we doing there? But still, that's Miami. They're like the pitcher in baseball that hits batters once every 2-3 innings, and he doesn't apologize. That's just his nature. Look, I'm going to throw gas right by your chin. That chin music's there, but I'm not going to apologize if I hit anyone because I want to strike fear in your heart that it's possible anytime you step up to the plate. Anytime you're a wide receiver, you go over the middle or you put your hands in the dirt next to one of these Miami offensive linemen that can have the size of 6'8", 350 pounds, that they're going to try and drive you through the back end of the goalpost. So this nature of the game and the way these two teams have essentially stuck to their guns and won a certain way in the CFP, and that's been what you expect of both of them. It leads you to believe this is going to be a game with some points. The offensive capabilities and the star talent and the offensive lines lead you to think that the points scored in this game, it'll be extremely tough to hold either team to less than 20 points. Specifically, the Miami running game and the way that they're efficient with their possessions. And then Indiana, with the play of Fernando Mendoza going to be the first overall player taken in the 2026 draft, probably by the Raiders or the Jets. I would say it's a 97% chance that it's going to be the Raiders or the Jets that wind up taking him. They're getting a heck of a kid. He's like the perfect human being, just about. And it's difficult to imagine they score less than 20. So what feels like the about type of score in this one? I feel like there is a team that wins this game by 2 scores. And that ultimately comes down to a mistake at some point. A defensive touchdown, be it a turnover in the red zone, special teams coming up with a blocked field goal, all of those phases of the game. And Davis, who's been a good kicker this year, how effective is he? He had a missed field goal on that game. Or Miami and Carson Beck, when they've won games this year, he hasn't turned the football over. In games that they have lost, like Louisville, where he throws 4 picks, that's absolutely something you look immediately at the stat box. All right, Beck threw 2 interceptions? Yeah, it's probably an 85% chance that they wound up losing that game. The same goes for Mendoza, 15-0. They've got the chance to be the first team in college football history to have a perfect 16-0 season. And I don't think that the CFP is going to be expanded to the point where you're going to get more than that. I think that you'd have to actually get it to like 30, like 24, at least 32 to get to a record beyond that. And who wants to see that many teams? It'd be way too deep at that point. You're talking about more than 20 teams. So 16-0 would be the greatest season in college football history. And the brands that they would have knocked off to get it, this new coming powerhouse with all that money in Oregon, and then this blue blood through and through team that's been there and the most recognizable brand in the sport. And then the team that people were saying is now the gold standard in college football and defending national champion Buckeyes. So you knocked off those 3 programs that have been 3 of the best 5 over at least that last half decade, and more than that for Ohio State and Alabama. That's what's at stake for Indiana, putting together the best season in football history. And then ultimately, you'll have debates and conversations, and from the SEC down, they'll come out and try and tear that apart, talking about how many great rosters and all-time great teams there were. Sure, like your 2020 Bamas, your 2019 LSUs, Miami fans talking about the 2001 team. I get all of that, sure. And this Miami team, if they win, they're not going to care about narrative. They'll have been national champions because they stayed together. They were a team that would fight, that would claw. They would do anything necessary to come out with a win. And they brought in a quarterback that was embattled and erased out of town with pitchforks and a mob mentality coming after him after he just won an SEC title. And what does he do? He just went to work, showing up at the building 5 a.m. every single day, and then runs in and gets that game-winning rushing touchdown to send his team to the national title game and gets that national championship game in his home building. I can't imagine a better story than Carson Beck, what he'll be able to tell. And then Fernando Mendoza, you just can't make up a better story than Indiana and a fan base that deserves it more than the Indiana Hoosiers and Miami fans for that matter, and what they deserve and the support for their team. Both these teams, I'll state this, their fan bases should be extremely proud and have a ton of belief that they can maintain this type of standard going forward. It's not a matter of money. You've got head coaches now that have their fan base, I hope, fully behind them. I know Indiana does. They're basically ready to induct Curt Cignetti into the College Football Hall of Fame, and why not? Why not do it with this level of turnaround? And Mario, Cristobal, these two guys are that Nick Saban coaching tree, all four, Golding and Lanning being a part of it as well. It just goes to show you what the impact Saban has had, and then he takes that, and they've got their own paths. And Mario Cristobal's got the opportunity to separate himself fully and become, what are there? There's only two active there's three active head coaches in college football that have national titles. Dabo Swinney, Ryan Day, and Kirby Smart. There's only three. Well, there's going to be four in college football after this game. And the guys that have a team that fights harder, that is more violent, that doesn't make mistakes, that is sharper, fully more prepared in the moment they actually show up. There's no doubt preparation will be there, intensity will be, desire, heart, drive. But in those biggest moments, that focus and then simply executing is what it comes down to. And when I look at this game, it would be close to impossible for me to not pick the Indiana Hoosiers with the way that they've played and them coming out with the win. Now, Mesidor and Bain, they're the biggest guys that can throw a wrench in that. Number 10, Malachi Toney, and what he can do. Without a doubt. Carson Beck, his ability to make big plays when it counts. And he's played in some really big games and now has Indiana. I'm going to take Indiana to win this game by 11 points. I see them being up by about 6, I call it about 4 late in the game. I think they get a turnover and then get a late score to give them a 2-score lead and win it, but it really being a bit closer of a game than that. I'm going to take them to win 31-20, stamp their resume as the best season in college football history and fully deserving of that national title trophy. And think about this, going on the road in that environment, what they're going to have to deal with. They had more fans in Pasadena for the Rose Bowl. They had far more fans and essentially had more than a home game against Oregon. This is a road environment now, something that's incredibly rare for college football to get that in a national championship game. So that's going to be a major storyline and talked about. But why Indiana wins this one 31-20? It's their Heisman Trophy quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, truly is the best player in college football with those weapons around him, these 3 wide receivers, that run game that continues to bend really talented players against their will. Tim Keenan, Overton for Bama, they're knocked out of the way. And then for Oregon, Amari Washington, Bear Alexander, Mateo Uyunglele, Tatum Tuioti, Thieneman, all of them pushed out of the way. And so I'm predicting that they do the same to Moten, to Mesidor, and to Bain Jr., and moving themselves into a national championship and scoring enough points to do it. 31-20, they come out with the win. It's been unbelievable, and I appreciate you all so much for the support throughout the season. Thank you for watching all season long with these preview and predictions. This is the last one of the season, the national title game. We're going to be back next year, breaking down all of the key games throughout the year, just about every single ranked matchup, and diving in the offseason to the transfer portal activity. Just because the Natty's coming up, we're going to have videos coming out from the get-go the first week of the offseason. Even before that, we're going to try and get videos about rankings going into the NFL draft, what players. There's such a beautiful connection between college football and the pro level. So those about 12, 13 weeks after the college football season, before the draft, about 3 months, and then about 10 weeks from the Super Bowl to the NFL draft, where we celebrate these players. We lock into what they did as college prospects and then the NFL. So those of you that love NFL football as well, I previewed and we'll be doing all the NFL games, and we'll be doing that as well throughout that offseason. So we're here to stay and to continue all of this. We're just getting started here with Blitz with Blender. So if you're not subscribed, please do so. It's free. Does not cost you anything. It just helps me to continue to work at this as hard as I can to make better content, to at the end of the day just entertain you and give you a different perspective and enjoy some more content talking about the sport of football that we love and that we enjoy. So if you are subscribed, thank you so much for supporting and for watching this throughout the way. And we are going to enjoy a heck of a national title game in the offseason that comes right after that. Miami, unbelievable year. Indiana, the same for them. It's too bad that one of these two teams has to lose. I wish both of them would be national champions in the way that they've made their cities and their alumni and their fan base, their coaches and the teammates, everyone's so proud throughout them. I'm certainly proud of watching these young men battle throughout the year and these fan bases come around to support their guys. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. Best player in college football.
That Georgia and Ohio State game, New Year's Eve, is going to be a classic.
Josh Blunder, hi everybody, I'm Josh Blunder. To the 40, 35, 30, Espinoza to the 20,